Considering the recent circumstances Kevin Young and his program have found themselves in, this matchup against Iowa State tomorrow night would look like a significant mismatch. But based on everything I have read, this looks like a prime opportunity for BYU to notch that elusive signature win.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, 14-year credentialed media member at BYU, your resident expert and insiders, your host here on the show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you for making all of us fine folks over at Locked On, the #1 sports podcast network. Coming up on today's show, we are going to talk about BYU and the big opportunity I think they have tomorrow night against Iowa State to notch what they're still looking for, an exclusive signature quad 1A win over the Cyclones. We'll get into how they would pull that off. Then we're going to talk about BYU football. Did you know that we're a week away from spring ball starting? Yeah, crazy as it sounds, they are going to start spring ball a week from now, and they have 1/3 of their roster being turned over with newcomers. How different will that make things feel and look for Kalani Sitake? We'll get into that, and then we'll continue our conversation with Ammon Montenegro. This is a guy who has been an effervescent personality, has been on the sidelines for BYU events for a long time, but missed a significant portion of this year, and he details exactly what went down and why he's so thankful to be back on the sidelines just recently. So get to all that ahead on today's show. And it's all brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. You can have your cake and drink it too. Birthday cake flavor is back. No fork needed. Vanilla-y, cakey flavor, caffeinated kick, and no sugar. It's party time. Order now at 5 Hour Energy or get them on Amazon. All right. So BYU and the Iowa State Cyclones are set to square off tomorrow night at the Marriott Center. Another late night game at the MC, 8:30 p.m. tip-off as the Cyclones come to town. And BYU is getting short on remaining opportunities to tally what has been kind of eluding them when it comes to their NCAA tournament resume, and that is a signature win, just a true game that you look at and say, you know what, that's the win that is going to make or break BYU's case when it comes to going in front of the selection committee. If you missed it yesterday, it came out of the mock selection committee. They bring a bunch of media members from all over the country together to go through what the NCAA tournament selection committee experiences. And it came out that BYU currently, despite everything that's gone on, they considered all circumstances, the Richie Saunders injuries, the other injuries BYU's endured, the fact that they haven't been necessarily as dominant and as good as some people thought they were. We all thought they were going into the season. BYU right now is still slated as a 6th seed. That shows you that any of you who have got concerns that BYU, should they lose out, could find themselves on the bubble, looking on the outside, being on the outside looking in when it comes to March Madness, I don't think that's going to be the case. And I also don't think that BYU is going to lose out. They still have games remaining against the likes of UCF coming up next week. They go to West Virginia and to Cincinnati. Those are not murderer's row. Yes, there are the games I mentioned against Iowa State tomorrow night, and then you finish up their senior night showdown against Texas Tech in the Marriott Center. But BYU is not out of the tournament field by any stretch of the imagination. And quite literally, I don't think even if they lost out, BYU is going to find themselves on the outside of the NCAA tournament. Speaking of coming up next month, that's just personal opinion on the matter and looking at the metrics as they bear out. But the bigger point to be made here is BYU has a big time opportunity tomorrow night against Iowa State. Yes, they are at a significant talent disadvantage right now with the number of injuries, most particularly losing a guy like Richie Saunders. That is an absolute just crowbar to the knee, figuratively, of the BYU basketball program, but they still have got guys and they've still got a competitive spirit. I refuse to say that BYU is going to fall off the wagon when it comes to the season after losing Richie, because the way they performed against Arizona on the road in Tucson the other night showed me that there's still I call it want to. There's a lot of just want to in this basketball team right now. And yes, there are significant issues with this BYU basketball team, particularly on defense. That is where it really feels like BYU will make or break this stretch run for themselves, is their ability to lock up on defense. Any of you, and I saw it on social media, et cetera, saying that Kevin Young is overrated as a coach, Well, okay, here's the thing. He's not overrated. He's put together two of the most prolific, if you look at offensive metrics and efficiency numbers, that BYU basketball quite literally has ever had in his first two seasons at BYU. While the offense is not the problem for BYU, it's got to be on the defensive end. They've got to be able to lock down, and that's going to require, like I said, that want to from this BYU basketball squad. And why I am of the opinion that tomorrow night against Iowa State, the Cyclones could be ripe for the picking, because in Big 12 play on the road so far this year, Iowa State ranked sixth in the country. They're 3-3 in Big 12 road games. And we have talked often about the fact that any road win you can pick up in Big 12 play is pretty significant, especially the likes of coming to Provo and playing in the Marriott Center. They like to call their home floor out there in Ames Hilton Magic. Well, guess what? The Marriott Magic that BYU's got in Provo, it's downright elite. The Rock, everything the BYU fans bring to the table and what they do for the environment there, it is going to be an advantage for BYU in this game against Iowa State. I'm not saying I'm expecting BYU to roll over the Cyclones, but I am expecting them to fight tooth and nail and make this a very, very difficult proposition to pick up a road win for the Cyclones. They're not imminently unbeatable, speaking of Iowa State, because I look at their roster. They have had better rosters, honestly, in the past, speaking of Iowa State. Milan Momčilović, I think I've got that pronunciation right, is their leading scorer at 18 points a game. Joshua Jefferson, who I think is actually, in my opinion, their best player. He's averaging 16 and a half and 7.5, speaking of points and rebounds. And then Tamin Lipsey, who has been a phenomenal player. He's averaging 13 points per game. And those are kind of their big three, speaking of Iowa State. But I think that this is a game that if BYU brings the type of effort they've brought, like I said, Wednesday night against Arizona, and they do have that home crowd behind them, I think this is that game that BYU could win and finally have that elusive signature win, that when it comes finally for the real NCAA tournament selection committee to say, okay, let's look at BYU here. Yes, they lost Richie Saunders. Yes, they've been decimated due to injury by and large to their lineup. Their bench is a mess, and they've got a lot of metrics that both work and go against them. But you look at their body of work. Excuse me. Still dealing with the after effects of a cold, if you guys can't tell my voice. But the thing is, you pick up that win over Iowa State, and it's inarguable that BYU is going to find itself a single-digit seed and could actually be a better seed than many of us expect. Because as I said, that mock selection committee, I didn't expect BYU to be a 6 seed, but they were, and they were lined up for the second round showdown in a matchup with Gonzaga, who was a 3 seed. Oh, the memories. Oh, the matchup that could be. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that BYU still very well could finish the season with a flourish. I refuse to say that they're done. They're cooked, like some people want to say they are on social media, because I saw the heart, the desire, everything that you want to see from a team in that game against Arizona, when easily it could have gone the other way, where they could have just mailed it and said, yeah, this season is over. So long as they bring that same type of intensity, you as Cougar fans go and impact that game as best you can, cheering on your team in the Marriott Center. Yeah, that Marriott Magic, it could rival Hilton Magic in terms of the opportunity for BYU to notch a big win over the Iowa State Cyclones. And we'll see how it all plays out tomorrow night under the lights in the Marriott Center. All right, coming up next, 7 days. That is what separates us from the next major milestone on our path to the upcoming BYU football season. Spring ball is about to begin, and Kalani Sitake has got a little more turnover than you might imagine with this year's squad. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at I got to pull the wrong copy. That's always an embarrassing thing. But it's brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. We're looking at every aspect of the draft to let you know which tasty flavors are the best and which just might be sleepers for you guys. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and only one is taking the top spot. 5 Hour Energy has a wide variety of flavors and something that fits everybody's flavor profile. If you don't believe me, you can just kind of go online and look at their different options. The best part is I've got a handful of favorites in my own. Cherry, I'm a sucker for cherry flavor. I don't know what it is. I've always enjoyed it. Grape is also one of my favorites. And then probably my all-time favorite in my limited experience with our friends over at Energy, berry. That is probably my hometown favorite, but they have got a bevy of others: sour apple, Hawaiian breeze, strawberry banana, just to name a handful more. Take advantage today and go get yourself your favorite profile from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. The best part is you can find your favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or go on Amazon. And if you want to get in on the action with the draft, you can do just that. But once again, go to 5hourenergy.com or order your 5 Hour Energy today on Amazon. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. All right, if you ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, well, I would like to do that. FanDuel is giving you that chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future right now. You automatically enter to win a trip for 2 to the NBA Finals. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience available to you courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel. I love futures odds this time of year, whether it's picking a heavy favorite to win the NBA title. I think somebody's going to come out of the East or the Western Conference and make a run. You can put that money down, and it adds extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. Not only can you pick cash, it also could send you to the NBA Finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Use that pro offer boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals coming up a little later on this year. Play your game with FanDuel. They are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for being here on Locked On Cougars. If you would like to be, a bigger fan than you are already with Locked On Cougars, check out what we've got going on with the Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. Go to lockedoncougars.supercast.com. Get access to our members-only Discord server. Get ad-free audio episodes of Locked On Cougars and a bevy more of options at different tiers that we offer to you guys. It's lockedoncougars.supercast.com. All right, so BYU football opens spring ball a week. Yes, 7 days away from today. Now you're thinking, Jake, it's still February. Why are they starting spring ball already? Well, just understand that based on how the academic calendar goes at BYU, this is essentially where BYU has to do it. And they will spread their 15 practices out over the month-long camps that they will have. They'll have their traditional alumni game, which has kind of replaced what used to be the spring game for BYU football. But looking at things for Kalani Sitake's program is that I have talked a lot about what I consider to be major continuity for BYU's roster returning this year and obviously chasing a Big 12 championship and that elusive college football playoff berth. Those remain the goals, obviously, for the BYU football program. And yes, if you go by any measure of a checklist of top players that you would like to have back for the BYU Cougars, you would have to say that on paper, they retained everybody you would have liked to have had back. But beyond kind of that front line, the stars of this program, the Bear Bachmeyers, the LJ Martins, on the offensive line, guys like Bruce Mitchell, Kyle Safarchuk, et cetera, Andrew Gentry. And then over on defense, you got Keanu Tanavasa. You got the linebackers in Isaiah Glasker, Siale Acera, Cade Uluwave, and then in the secondary, Falatau Satuala, Evan Johnson, Trey Alexander, on and on and on the list. Beyond that, there is actually a significant roster overhaul being undertaken by this BYU football squad, and it's just simple math of how things go. BYU had a lot of roster continuity for many, many years, going back to essentially from like 2020 to this past football season. There were a lot of guys who were major contributors for multiple years, and that roster continuity was a big reason why BYU is put together back-to-back 10-plus win seasons in the Big 12, going 23-4 the past 2 years in particular in Big 12 play. Well, the frontline guys, as I mentioned this year, are going to stay there, but behind them, there are 33 new faces on this roster, and with the pare down of college football rosters to 105 players, that's essentially 1/3 of BYU's roster being turned over this offseason. Some of them are early enrollees, guys like Jaron Pula and Kenan Pula, legend Glasker, Devon Eka, stud high school football players who you expect are going to hopefully make a push for playing time and have already enrolled in school. There's guys back off of missions. I think of guys like Matthew Frederick, who was at East High School many, many moons ago, but now he's home off of mission. I think he could be a phenomenal tight end in time for BYU, but he's obviously got to prove that coming home off of a mission. And then obviously, I already mentioned a name like Kedu Luave, Zach Yamauchi, Paki Finau, the transfer portal guys BYU brought in. Excuse me. They are all there looking to make an impression this spring ball and either cement their name in the early two deep going into the summer, or B, establish themselves as a starting caliber player for this BYU football program. Now, becoming a starter coming out of spring ball, you still have to work throughout the summer, throughout player run practices, and obviously prove it in training camp to solidify your spot. But this spring camp is a major opportunity because Kalani Sitake talks about it often, is that he believes in competition. Nobody's job, not even, okay, I can't say that with straight face. Had a bit of a blip there, but the bigger point I meant to say is that while Kalani Sitake may tell you that the likes of Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin, their job, they're expected to compete for their job every day. Yes, they are, but they essentially, you're pretty safe to put their name down in ink in terms of their starting status for the BYU football program. But it does not mean that this spring ball is any less important to those players. Yeah, they may miss out on some extra drills in terms of not wanting to put them at risk health-wise when you don't need to in Aaron Roderick's offense, etc. But you also need to have guys behind them who are training and working to essentially set up the succession plan for each of those positions. And that's where I think that Kalani Sitake's got things right, is he is going to open things up in spring ball. Paki Finau, Junior Sia, Zach Yamauchi on the offensive line, all three of them have got to be coming in and thinking, all right, we're going to challenge and we're going to be starters come the end of spring ball. But then on the flip side, Andrew Gentry, Kyle Safarchuk, Sonny Makassini, Bruce Mitchell, etc. These holdovers that have been very, very solid, if not downright standout players on that offensive line are thinking, there's no way in you know what you're taking my job from me. And kind of the same storyline across the roster for BYU. That iron sharpens iron mentality, I think it's going to be a major calling card for this BYU football program. And that's what it needs to be, because all of us, yours truly included, want to watch this BYU team finally break through and, yes, win a Big 12 title, but even more than that, we want to see them competing for a national championship, and that means being part of the college football playoff. This year's schedule for BYU lines up where they've got a big-time opportunity to make another run at 11 or 12 wins. The most difficult games on the schedule, well, obviously a home game, a marquee home game against Notre Dame. You have to go to Utah. You have Arizona State and Arizona on the docket, but they're all kind of spread out by and large. I know there's a back-to-back with Arizona State and Utah, but I think the way that the schedule lays out for the Cougars is very advantageous for an opportunity to make noise on the national scene and force the College Football Playoff Committee into an uncomfortable situation once again, where they're having to consider the candidacy of BYU. And maybe, just maybe, if what we have talked about here comes true, where they are, 11-1, heaven forbid 12-0, going into the postseason, obviously a Big 12 championship game, etc., maybe the buffoonery of the CFP committee will finally be in the past. I'm also not holding my breath on that front, but a guy can dream, right? So I think the nice part is this is a team, speaking of BYU football, that has got the top line guys who are obviously going to go out in spring ball and show everybody that, we mean business and we plan on being a force in Big 12, if not on the national scene all season long. But beyond that as well, this kind of roster overhaul that's being undertaken. And it's not, like I said, it's not of necessity. It's because just simple numbers are bearing it out. There's a lot of young talent that's coming in, and some of it's established via the transfer portal, but it's going to have a big time opportunity to come in and unseat other backup type players who have been biding their time, hoping that they would get that opportunity. It is going to be an intriguing spring camp, because I really do think each one of these players have got to be thinking in their heart of hearts that this is my time to step forward. Yeah, LJ Martin is there at running back, but if you're Micah Beckstead, who's coming in off of a mission after originally signed with Utah State, or you're a high school stud like Devon Eka was at Lehigh High School, why wouldn't you be thinking, with all the other injuries that the other backup players had last year at running back for BYU, why wouldn't you be thinking, hey, I'm going to be the number 2. I'm going to be the Robin to LJ's Batman. But meanwhile, Sione Moa, etc., Jovessa Dumuni over there like, yeah, hold your horses. I'm going to prove that I'm that guy. I'm him. I'm capable of holding up there. That is the type of mentality I look forward to seeing BYU foster this entire spring camp, because the talent base for BYU football, it's never been higher in terms of just the overall talent spread across this roster. But there are still levels BYU can get to. And so long as they continue to aspire to get to those levels, well, we've already seen them be on the doorstep of being a college football playoff caliber squad. And my opinion was they were a playoff caliber squad a season ago. Just like I said, buffoons that run the sport kept them out of it. But so long as they break through, they can continue to compete at the level they're competing at. Kalani Sitake has got BYU football back where I think all of us wanted it to be for quite literally decades until recently when BYU finally got into the Big 12 conference. Now it's just a matter of, making sure that you break through. And when you get that opportunity, when you are on that big stage in the college football playoff, let's see him deliver and put on a performance for the ages and really assert themselves that, yeah, BYU is a force once again in college football nationally, not just with us watching the Cougars up close and personal. All right, coming up next, we will finish up today's show. I played part one of a conversation I had with Ammon Montenegro, who is quite literally on the front lines of supporting BYU athletics as a member of the BYU cheer squad. Well, you may have noticed kind of the tail end of the football season and early on in basketball season, he was not on the sidelines. Well, he had a pretty incredible predicament that he's overcome, and he details what all it entailed and how far he really literally has come in recent weeks, if not, actually, it's probably weeks, quite literally, but a great conversation, and I think it's fairly inspirational what he's overcome as well. And we'll roll on with that next right here on Locked On Cougars.
I'm Clea Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. It was a heavyweight showdown between number 3 South Carolina and number 7 LSU, and the Gamecocks rose to the occasion. South Carolina secured a hard-fought 79-72 victory to stay atop the SEC standings, using a balanced offensive attack to outlast the Tigers. Tessa Johnson led the way with 21 points, while Raven Johnson added 19. Medina Okot dominated the paint with a double-double, finishing with 12 points and 17 rebounds, while Joyce Edwards chipped in 10 points to round out the scoring. With the statement win, the Gamecocks now turn their attention to a road matchup at number 23 Alabama on Thursday. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you've not subscribed, rated, reviewed, shared the show with your family and friends, or done anything else to really support the podcast, now is your time to do just that. As always, appreciate any and all support you guys give to this show. It's been a phenomenal 2025, and I know that we're well into 2026, but we are very much looking forward to continuing to bring you the best and brightest coverage of all things BYU athletics as your original daily podcast focused on all things BYU. So thank you so much for your support. All right, so time now for part 2 of a conversation I had recently with Ammon Montenegro. He's a member of the BYU cheer squad. If you missed it, part 1, we played it on yesterday's podcast. He talked a lot about how a high school football player ended up becoming a pretty iconic cheerleader and now a burgeoning social media superstar in the Instagram world, etc. Well, Ammon was a guy who I had seen on the sidelines for many BYU athletic events, but then towards the tail end of the football season last year, conspicuously absent from said sidelines. And let's just put it this way. This young man, he has been through it, and he details that and a whole lot more right now, right here on Locked On Cougars. Let's just put it this way. You have had quite a wild ride of late.
Yeah, I did. So yeah, right on Thanksgiving, everything was pretty good. I mean, way left field, so random. I got home from Cincinnati. I ended up getting really sick. I thought it was just a flu, fever, just whatever, because everyone was getting sick at the time. Said maybe a couple days rest, I'll be all right. No, man, I ended up, thank goodness my roommates were here, but I ended up actually having to go to the hospital. I had a fever of 106.7. I went septic. So, I mean, I didn't know what sepsis was until I was in the hospital, but more especially when I got out. When people, once they heard I went septic, they're like, wow, that's crazy that you're alive, because we know people who get sepsis, they don't tend to make it, or people get body parts amputated or just crazy stuff. So it was a massive blessing that my roommates took me in when I did, because I was basically, it was 1 a.m. I was going into shock. One of them was awake and I blacked out. They rushed me to the ER. They carried me to the ER, and I was there for 6 days. Never been to the hospital before, but I ended up getting pneumonia. So then when I got released, I had a PICC line in my arm. If you guys don't know, like a PICC line basically goes to the entrance of the heart so you can do IV. I had to sit around and do nothing for a month. And so I was out of it. Like I didn't go to the bowl game. I didn't go to the Big 12 championship. I missed big basketball games and everything. And I just basically started from baby steps, literally walking on a treadmill. Not that I couldn't walk or anything, but my recovery back into athletic like activity had to start with the bare minimums. And you know, we're doing a lot better now, but it's still a process.
That's crazy because when you hear somebody go septic, you're like, well, essentially you're like, well, nice knowing you in some ways. And I think it's a literal miracle that you're where you're at this point, because you said it's still a process. Like you're not fully back to, I think, what would be 100% of what you were before that, but it's an incredible story in and of itself. But you've been open to sharing that with Cougar fans and the greater community at large, and detailing your experience. What have you learned? Like, what have you taken away from it?
That's actually, thanks so much for asking that. When that happened, obviously my life went on pause. Yeah. And everything that was kind of on my mind, things that were kind of like stressing me out, everything literally went on pause. And I said, you know, I am alive right now and I am grateful to be alive. And I realized everything that I've ever feared, everything I've ever feared doing, ever feared becoming, everything that has ever stopped me, that stuff doesn't matter. Basically, what I mean is, if I were to have, let's say, passed away, anything that I ever worried about, like my self-image or like what I think other people cared about me, it wouldn't have mattered because my life would have been done. So I said, you know what? It doesn't matter like what other people think about me or things that might hold me back. Obviously, I'll make very wise decisions, not say I'm going to go act like the fool, but there's no reason for me to fear, you to fear, any of us to fear, like trying to just go out and do new opportunities, because if it doesn't work out, hey, you are still alive. And so that's one of the biggest things I took. And I mean, it was a big strength for me as well with my faith, because I was there and I was at the point where I said, you know, whatever happens to me, I have no idea. Heavenly Father, I trust you. And if I am alive to go day by day, I will do it with you. And, you know, it was just a blessing again that I've been able to recover the way I've been able to recover. And my perspective of the future and life each and every day, I have to remind myself, hey, you need to live this day to the fullest. And that might mean different things, but those are some of the biggest things I learned.
So as you move forward here, obviously you've got a burgeoning influencer status that obviously can, I think, carry on beyond your college years, and who knows what the future holds for you in that regard, what the future holds in general for you. But give me a sense. You said you didn't really have much connection to BYU before arriving in Provo, but what has your BYU experience been like?
BYU has been like the coolest place for me, I would say. And I think lots of people who want to be in touch with religion, with God, with faith, this is one of the best places to do it. I hear people think and say, man, praying before a class, that's kind of weird. But I've been raised in a family where we pray before every meal. We kneel to pray with our siblings and our parents every night and every morning. And so praying is such a big part of my life that I enjoy, like being part of group prayers or like people's prayers. And especially when it comes to my study, because it reminds me that everything that I'm learning, every secular thing that I'm learning, there is divinity in all of it. And it's like what we want to remember, that all this stuff, Heavenly Father is part of it, and we need to keep him central to that. And like the religion class is super awesome. It was so fun to just keep learning. I think it's so fun to learn because maybe if I don't do my own personal studies, or if I'm not like doing my own personal prayers, I get to go to class in school every day and at least have it done there. So it strengthened my faith there. the people at BYU, I mean, and I can only say to my experience at BYU, because I've never been to a different university. Obviously, I went to Snow, which has a similar atmosphere to BYU because it's in Utah. But man, the people here are so nice, and it's such a pleasant campus. And I'm sorry for anyone who, let's say, doesn't quite have that experience, but in general, lots of people come to BYU. Opposing fans come here, and they see the culture and the spirit that like we have, and we try to give to them. And then our like being around athletics is so cool to meet just these higher up BYU legends at their sport or at whatever they did, and to see that these are good dudes. And like for me, like I was just a little cheerleader, but they know you, they recognize you. And then man, President Shane Reese, that guy is one of the coolest guys on BYU campus. I mean, if you guys don't know this, go look up President Reese crowd surfing after the Utah game. Like he was so cool at the Alamo Bowl. I actually wasn't paying attention. We run flags after touchdowns. I wasn't there. President Reese is running the flags. Like him, Keith Warkink, and just man, the whole BYU experience. It's one of the best, I would say, in the nation, and everyone should have a chance to experience it. But if they don't, I should be the one to help show that and portray that.
Well, and the content you create, obviously, you mentioned you tap into the LDS community, you tap into the BYU community. You want to make it relatable for people. And I think what you do in social media and what you do on TikTok and Instagram and all the different platforms is you try and create a touch point in your own way for that. Because you're right, there are going to be thousands, if not millions of people that, whether they're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or not, that will never experience what BYU is like, or ever maybe even step foot on campus in Provo. But you can, in your own way, speaking of you personally, can kind of create a touch point for them to get a feel for what it ultimately entails to be there in Provo. And I guess that kind of bleeds over in what you do with your social media and what you do in cheerleading and all these different facets of your life. And I guess I'm making a statement, but also asking you, has that been what you've endeavored to do?
It definitely is. And I would say everything that I've ever posted has just been super, super authentic me. I mean, if I post something that's funny and goes viral, I just thought it was funny. When it comes to that sort of stuff, there might be trends and stuff, but I will never, ever, ever try to like recreate a trend word for word as someone else. And I see it all over social media, and like, well, I mean, if someone already did it, I'm not going to do it. So everything I do is like comes from my own brain, which I feel is because of the impact, the positive influence. I do feel like Heavenly Father is giving me some sort of creative like mindset to do these things. And then with cheer, I just want to promote what I'm doing. And whether I had 1,000 followers or whether I had as 1 million, doesn't matter. I would still do the same content that I'm doing right now. And I want to like keep up with it. And I don't want to keep up with it in the way that, man, I want to just have a ton of followers. I want to get a bunch of money from brand deals. Like that stuff would come if it's just part of it, and that's okay, whatever. Like my goal, my sole intentions right now in life isn't to just become super famous and get millions of dollars, but from what I've actually experienced interacting with people who've seen my stuff, man, I just want to do it for them. I want to do it to continue to not get their praise, but just, they said, I appreciate it, and that means what I do is something that is impacting some other aspect of their life, whether that's theirs, their families, whatever. Like, I just want to do it for them, and I want to try to keep up with it, Well,
that's phenomenal. Well, Ammon, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I know you and I have interacted for the better part of 2 years roughly in terms of just off and on, but I wanted to make this happen, have you on the show and kind of let Cougar Nation get to know a member of the BYU community who they may see on social media or on their if they're scrolling through Instagram reels or on TikTok, etc. But let them know who the Ammon Montenegro is means as it was. So really do appreciate you carving out some time to join us here on the podcast.
Thank you. I just want to give a quick little shout out. I always got to do this for my coach, Jocelyn Allen. Quick little thing. She she cheered here about 20 years ago, and she's been the coach since. And, she has built the cheer squad into what it has today. All the perks and everything that we have with the athletic department and everything like that. She has been the one that has been the forefront of that, and she's done a ton for this program. So I just want to make sure she gets the credit that she deserves and helping me develop into who I am as a captain and as everything else, but also for BYU Nation and the BYU cheer squad as a whole.
And there you have it, Ammon Montenegro. A big thank you to him for taking the time to join us here on the podcast. We will compile the 2 parts of that conversation. We'll get a full, essentially standalone podcast out for you guys if you want to hear the whole story. But really, really inspirational stuff. And at the same time, a guy who's overcome a lot as well as he continues to live his dream of supporting BYU, even though maybe that wasn't necessarily the dream right up front when he came into the college sphere playing football at Snow College. But he has become a really, really vocal proponent of BYU, literally as a sideline, as a cheerleader on the sidelines, but also what he's doing on social media. It obviously is helping build his brand, but also furthering the brand and mission of BYU and their athletics program. So big thank you to Ammon, as always, for taking the time on the show. And I hope you guys found that a story of, I think it's pretty inspirational, what he's overcome and what he endured, because that's some scary, scary stuff that he endured with his health, but it's good to have him back out there working his way back up to full fitness and obviously continue to do what he does as a member of BYU's cheer team. All right. That is going to do it for this Friday edition of the show. Enjoy the game tomorrow, BYU and Iowa State. We'll do a postcast after it goes final, react to whatever happens in that one. And as always, next week, we're leading up to BYU spring ball. There's still BYU basketball games, UCF and West Virginia on deck next week. So there's a plenty of BYU stuff that we'll be covering every single day right here on your original daily podcast, focus on all things BYU. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you're watching this on video, we're now going to send you to the first ever 24/7 Locked On YouTube channel, getting you all the YouTube content that you can find with the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you're listening to this on audio, go make your second listen of the day, Locked On College Football, where you may hear a familiar voice because, I may or may not have been on that show earlier today or whenever you're listening to this. I'm on Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin today as well. So as always, thank you for your support of the podcast. Have a great rest of your day and come back and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.